Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this IWDS Local Systems Administrator Training, Entities and Relationships. My name is Antonio Gomez with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at Illinois State University. I will be the moderator and technical support for today's meeting. We invite all attendees to hold all questions until the Q&A portion of this panel. During the Q&A, we invite attendees to raise their hands before they unmute themselves. In an effort to be as accessible as possible, this webinar will be...
Antonio?
Yeah.
Antonio, just chat. Just chat.
Just chat? Perfect. So do not unmute yourselves. Just ask questions in the chat and we will deal with them whenever we come to the Q&A portions. In an effort to be as accessible as possible, this webinar will be offered with closed captioning. So feel free to turn that on using your Zoom toolbar. We will be recording today's webinar, and this recording will be available to you no later than Monday by the end of the day. Kirsten will be sending out the PowerPoint and recording sometime tomorrow. Now I will hand it off to Christopher Tylen to start the presentation.
Thank you, Antonio. All right. This is a little bit more in-depth. Not all local system administrators in IWDS deal with entities, locations, and relationships, but it's something that I think all of them should be aware of. There are a number of things about it that are important and things that affect other parts of IWDS, such as whether or not someone has a public side login to be able to go in and enter training programs for their company instead of having the local system administrators having to enter it for them. Now, we do not cover training programs in this. That is something that is handled by the WIOA performance measure staff, Paula Berry and Mark Burgess, and I don't cover that in this training. We just go as far as the relationships and setting those up. So with no further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. Some basic acronyms that we're going to be using throughout this presentation. DCEO stands for the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. OET stands for the DCEO Office of Employment and Training. IWDS stands for the Illinois Workforce Development System. LWIA, LWIA, stands for Local Workforce Innovation Area. LSA is short for Local System Administrator. And FEIN, or FEIN, is short for Federal Employer Identification Number. Now, when you're taking a look at this, this is kind of the way to imagine your entity locations and relationships. There is going to be one entity with multiple locations under it, and then you can have multiple relationships for every location. One relationship with one location does not cover all locations. If there are 5 locations for a company and you need to have services offered at all 5, you're going to have to create at least 5 relationships, one for each location. And we'll get into that in a lot more depth as we're going, but I just wanted people to kind of get a visual understanding that it's one, more, and more. It really is a triangle, a pyramid going down. Overview. What is an entity in IWDS? An entity is a business or organization unit with its own unique FEIN number. FEIN stands for Federal Employer Identification Number, and it is a unique 9-digit number issued by the IRS to business entities operating in the United States for purpose of identification. 2 or more entities can have the same business name, but they will have different FEINs. So every business that you have that has a unique FEIN should have its own separate entity record in IWDS. Good examples of that are like most McDonald's or Walgreens are going to have individual FEIN numbers for each physical building or franchisee. You may have that there are 15 McDonald's in your town, but if they're owned by 3 different franchisees, there may be 3 different FEIN numbers. Or, depending on how they set themselves up, each of those 15 McDonald's might have a different FEIN number. Walgreens is the same way. Every Walgreens has its own FEIN that I have, so far as I have seen. You may have 4 Walgreens that you're putting into your system because they're offering pharmacy tech or pharmacist or other things that you want to use for job search or job training or even on the job training, but each one of them is going to have their own FEIN. So if you have a brand new Walgreens that's coming into the system, you might need to double check the FEIN number to make sure that you don't have to enter it as a new entity instead of just trying to add a location. So the FEIN is very important when you go to deal with the entity. You want to make sure that you have it when you get started. A location in IWDS is a physical geographical address from which an entity provides goods and services to a public. An entity can have multiple locations that are all using the same FEIN. A good example of this are grocery stores. I'm going to use an example that most of the northern people are really going to understand, and those of you who are older will remember here in Central, but Jewel Osco. You had the parent corporation, Albertsons in the 90s, and going farther back in the 80s, it was Jewel Food Stores, and they were the parent company with the FEIN. And then all of the locations shared the FEIN number, but they had different names, such as you had an Osco, you could have a standalone Osco drug, you could have a Jewel Osco, you could have a standalone Jewel. But each one of those, the way their business was set up, had the same FEIN numbers. So you had multiple locations, and those multiple locations could have different names, but they're all under the same umbrella company. This is why the FEIN number is so important. It helps you to determine whether it's an additional location or if it's a new entity. What is a relationship in IWDS? A relationship is entered into IWDS for a location to be a service provider for an OWIA. One relationship can cover multiple titles. It can cover 1A, 1D, 1Y, trade, or you could have one that is just doing 1A and 1Y. But one relationship can cover all of that. The location can have multiple relationships with the same LWIA and with multiple LWIAs. If everybody could just make sure they've got their phones muted, I would appreciate it. Thank you. So what we've got is we've got a situation here where you can have multiple relationships with a location. All right, we still have somebody who is not muted. I would really appreciate it if you got everybody double check their phones and make sure that you're muted. All right. So a single location can have multiple relationships with the same LWIA, or this location can have relationships with multiple LWIAs. You might have one particular location that it has relationships with LWIA 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, etc. So each LWIA doesn't have to create the entity over and over again or create the location over and over again. It's the relationship that can cross the LWIA boundaries freely statewide. The relationship number is a unique identifier that is selected by the local system administrator when they create the relationship in IWDS. We'll talk more about this later when we're in the relationships area. Every LWIA seems to have their own naming pattern or how they do it. However you guys are doing it is fine. Everybody's got their own style and their own method. Also in the overview, we're going to talk about the IWDS user roles that are needed in order to do these assignments. You have to have the entity maintenance role in order to add or edit the entity, the location, the contract, and the relationships. You have to have the role of entity maintenance assigned training function included in order to be able to do all of the previous, as well as the ability to assign training functions to locations. The LBA relationship manager is the role that's needed in order to be able to add or edit relationships. This training is going to be broken into 4 sections. We're going to talk about we're going to walk right through from beginning to end, how to create an entity, how to add a location to an entity, how to add a contact to a location, and then how to add the relationship to the location. Before entering the entity in IWDS, you need to search for the company from the staff menu page under the entity information section by clicking on search entity. This is just like entering a client in IWDS. We need to go out and search so that you're not duplicating efforts, wasting time, and then having an error come up that says that the same FEIN already exists. There are 4 ways to search for an entity: the name, the FEIN of the business, the social security number of the owner if they're using the social security number instead of an FEIN on like a sole proprietorship, and the agency type from the drop-down menu. You can also do combinations of these things. But honestly, the quickest, easiest, and most productive way to search is the FEIN number. It is a unique identifier that no 2 businesses share, and it will only return 1 result unless there is something really wrong. An FEIN search narrows it down to just that 1 result, and you should be able to move forward immediately from there without having to sift through and try to figure out which one of the different company names is the one that you're looking for. If you do search by entity name, it is suggested that you use partial name search if you don't have the FEIN number. This is very similar to the instructions that we give the career planners, that it's easier to use partial name search when searching for clients. IWDS will return a search with a match of everything that begins with all the letters that are entered into the search. And in the example here, if you search for TI, then it will return things like Tim, time, tire, and timberline. But if you search for the actual word timely, TIMELY, it will only return things like timely, timelies, or timely watch company. So you would lose anything if you've misspelled what you're searching for and you have an extra letter or you're missing a letter, then it will exclude that result. So we always say that when you're doing a partial name search, that less is more. Less letters will return more results. If no match is found when you do your search, then the entity will need to be created in IWDS. You'll get an informational message like this that says no data meets your criteria, and then you will click Add Entity. As we're going through these screens, any fields marked with the red asterisk are required in order to be able to save the record and move on. OET recommends entering as much information as you can, even in fields that are not required, as it may help other IWDS users to differentiate between entities that have the same business name. When creating an entity in IWDS, you enter the entity name, the FEIN, the agency type, and any additional information that you have that was provided by the business. Once you've done that and you're satisfied with what you have on the screen, click Next to save the entity, and IWDS takes the user to the Add Location screen. I know that was a very short thing, but entities are really simple. But if there's anybody that have any questions about entities, this is the time. And I think most of you guys know exactly how to do this, so I'm not too worried about this section. All right, moving on to locations. The informational message at the top of the screen tells you that your entity, we will look. We have some issues, Robert, with the NAICS codes. That's something that it all just, sometimes NAIC, the NAICS codes don't always work right. That's one of the things that I would actually say just privately to skip, because I don't see where having it in the entity does anything helpful, because even if you saw the NAICS code on there, you're going to have to look it up unless you have an amazing, phenomenal memory. It's kind of like we'll be talking about later on when we're doing the relationships, that it's not worth adding the SIPS code, even though you could, because it just bogs down the system. It's just extra information that really isn't that important on that particular screen. All right, when you after you've clicked save on the entity, this informational message appears at the top of the screen. That tells you the entity was saved. Now, and it automatically takes you to this add location screen, and you are required to add at least one location where that entity is doing business. That entity, you may be aware that it has 12, 15 locations, but you don't have to enter those. We're only worried about the ones where you're wanting to have relationships where they're going to be providing you services. So you have, if you're creating an entity, you have to have one location at least, but you don't have to enter all of them that you're aware of, just the ones that you plan on having services with. Location information includes location name, which could be entirely different from the entity name. We talked about the parent company of either Jewel Food Stores or Albertsons with the different stores working under them. An example that Central Illinois and maybe Southern will understand better is that Neiman Foods out of Quincy, they have locations like the Harvest Market, the County Market, Neiman Food Stores, and several other stores that they name their different grocery stores. And they may all share the same FEIN number, but they will not have the name of Neiman Foods like the entity. The location may be County Market. The geographical address and phone number. This is the physical location where the building is sitting. Whether or not the location is ADA accessible. Types of business functions and human services the location provides. Those are at the bottom. Fields with the red star are required. That's going to be the name, the address, the city, the zip, the county, the phone. I strongly recommend, just from experience, that you ask the question of your entity and just get in the habit of it, of making sure to know whether or not the location is accessible to persons with disabilities. It may be important to you at or to another LWIA when they're looking at this location at another time. It's a question that I have felt that maybe we ought to make required, but it hasn't. We haven't pulled the trigger on making that decision yet. We think that at the moment right now, most people are pretty good about answering the question or knowing whether or not, and most buildings are ADA accessible. It's getting less and less likely that a building won't be. The LSA will need to select the business functions for the various types of services that this location will be offering to the LWIAs. The business functions are right here in these check boxes. There are 10 to choose from. Career services, job placement, retention services, outreach, pay for performance training, debts, other, OJT, work experience, supportive services, and youth. There's another section, however, under here, human services. And in order to see the choices here, you have to select view the human services and click this button. This is where you start getting into your additional services where you're providing additional things, the SF services. So the provider management select human services screen is what will come up when you click that. You'll see here that we've got our business that's linking directly to the entity still because we're in the location. And we need to select at that point all of the services that will apply to this location that they are going to be providing. As you can see, there's things here from early childhood education to emergency food to dental care to bus passes to youth development. You just click everything that you think that this location is going to be providing, and then you click the button at the very bottom, View List. Now, when you're on this screen, it doesn't look like this. It's going to be one long screen. These are 3 screens set side by side just for the purposes of having everything on one slide and have it be readable. All the services that you selected at this point will be listed on the next screen after you click that View List. And it's going to give you that in this case, we picked business development, child care resource and referral, daycare services, clothing and grooming, household goods, and thrift shops. If you're satisfied with what you have here, you click View List. If you want to go back and select more, you can click Cancel. But we're going to click View List. And at this point, we go to a more permanent looking screen where it doesn't have the option of clicking or unclicking a button. If changes are needed to add or remove items to the list, at this point, you click Edit List again. Otherwise, if you are finished and you're happy with what you have here, you're going to click Accept List. We're going to click Accept. And at this point, the local system administrator goes back to the Add Location screen, and you're going to see here that all of the entered information is still there. The business functions you selected are still here. And now down here under Human Services, it goes on to list the first 3 with a thing saying that there's more. At this point, if you're satisfied with where you are here, you'll click to save the next to save the location, and it will take you to the Add Contact screen. Are there any questions about locations at this point? Corporate offices, do we change to yes? Let me go back here. When we're talking about the corporate office location, that would be if that's where the company headquarters is. If the corporate office is at that location, then you go ahead and you mark that yes. It would be a situation of where, for example, one of the stores, when I worked for Jewel Osco at one point in time. I was on the Osco drug side in the 90s. And our corporate office, the regional office, was at one particular location at West Monroe at Fair Hills Mall. If that's where the corporate office was at, as well as the store, then yes, you would mark that corporate office yes. If this is just a single location and it's not the corporate office as well, then you would leave it no. Most of the time anymore, I would say it's going to be fairly rare that the corporate office is going to be at one of their business locations. If it's a provider of actual tangible goods, a lot of them now have their own separate office building. However, when you're gathering the information to create the entity and the location, that's a good question to ask, Robert, if you wanted to, kind of similar to the ADA accessibility. Ask them if that's their corporate office or if the corporate office is located elsewhere. All right, we are going to move into contacts. Now at this point, you just click next to save the location. You'll get an informational message at the top of your screen saying the record has been added. Your location is now saved. Now, before you start worrying about adding an additional location, one of the things that I want to bring up here, and this is something that a lot of OEAs do not do. It is recommended by OET that you should be adding at least one contact for every location. And that is something that you should be able to get the information when you're getting the information from the person who's wanting to be added to be a service provider. They should be able to tell you who the contact person is for that location. There could be multiple people. I know that in cases of some of the community colleges, you click on a location and there's like 17 contacts. Now, granted, you can activate and deactivate contacts as people leave and add new ones because this teacher's now gone, that administrator's now gone. But this is something where this is housekeeping that is up to you guys. This is not something OET is going to do for you. We're not going to go through and call the location and find out whether or not the contacts that you have in there are active or not. The contacts are extremely important because these people are the ones who have the ability to go in and enter training programs for their location, like I said at the beginning, instead of you having to do it. If there's no contact for this location and there's going to be a training program at this location, then guess who has to enter it? It's going to be the local system administrator for the LWEA. So by having a contact in here and checking every once in a while to make sure that your contacts are up to date, it saves you work in the long run. So anyway, the entity should be identifying their location contact to the LWEA local system administrators, including what contact will be the person who enters training programs to the location if needed. Add a contact, we click the button, add contact, and IWDS takes you to the search contact screen. Now, I will note, IWDS does not require a contact for the location. If there is no contact information recorded, like I said, the local system administrator has to be responsible for any training programs for the location. So if you don't have a contact, you can just click return, and then at that point move on to adding the relationship or adding another location or whatever else it is that you need to do. I strongly recommend that it's in your best interest to add at least one contact for every location. I've seen a lot, I've done a lot. I just think it would save you trouble in the long run. Creating a contact in IWDS. Now we're at the search contact screen. Once again, like any search, we're talking about less is more. We can search for the person through any of the following. We can search by entity name, first name, last name, email, address, city, state, zip, county, primary phone, or any combination of the two. In the case of looking up by the entity name, if we're adding a location for a particular entity and we know the contact has been a contact for other locations within the entity, you can just search for the entity name, and then the contacts under that entity at all locations will come up for you to select from. If you want to search by a person's first initial last name, first initial partial last name, things of that nature, it will probably give you a few more results than what you're looking for if you have common names, but you should be able to find the person you're looking for. So if it turns out the person contact you're looking for is already in IWDS, you just add them to this new location. But since this entity location was just created, it's very likely that the contact person will have to be added. So at this point, we're just going to say that we've searched for a contact name, we didn't get any results, and now we're going to click Add Contact. We're going to use the very famous name of Jane Jetson, and any fields marked with the red asterisk are required in order to save the record. As you go through, you have to put in first name, last name, the address that they are working from, city, state, zip, county. We have discussed that possibly email and primary phone should be made required, but at this point we haven't seen it necessary. Down at the bottom, it is required to determine whether this is the primary contact for this location. That's a simple yes or no. And whether or not the status of the person is active or not. If this person leaves and another person comes in, all you do is you go to this screen. When you look up the contact, you change it from active yes to no. You can actually have the same person be a contact at multiple locations. Jane Jetson might be the contact for Timely Business Company at 5 different locations, but she might only be active at 3 of them. Maybe she's no longer responsible for that part of the business. Maybe they redrew their dividing lines of how their regions or divisions, or even as they went to counties. Just saying, making her active or not in one location does not affect her contact in a different location. Each one of these is only related to the location that you're working from inside of, which is the second line here. So the first line is the entity. The second line is the location. If there is more than one contact provided for the location that you're entering, you click Save, Add Another. Now, if you look down here at the bottom, there's also whether they're a human service provider or an ITA training provider. Those are things that you should know when you're adding it in, whether this contact person has either one of these job functions. Once you've clicked either Save, Add Another, or Save, the informational message at the top will state that the record has been added. This contact has now been saved on that location. Once a contact is saved, an IWDS username and login ID will be assigned to the contact for the IWDS public side login. This is not the regular login that your case managers are using. That's one of the things that a lot of new local system administrators don't understand. We have 2 separate login pages for IWDS. One is the red and blue, one is blue and orange. So the way I always kind of joke about it is that we got Cubs and Cardinals on the one side, and we've got the Fighting Illini on the other. Now, as you can see here, though, from this screen where it says it was saved, it's not telling you what the username, the login ID for IWDS public side is. In order to see that, you have to click the View button and go into the contact information of your saved record. From here, at the very bottom, you will now see the username that has been assigned. It's assigned using the same pattern that is used for creating IWDS user IDs for your career planners. It uses first initial, last name. Now, if somebody with first initial J and last name Jetson was already in IWDS, this may have been J Jetson 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. It is not, you should not ever have the issue. We ran into this around 2014 when Marsha Maston was still here. We had a problem where the 2 different user ID generations weren't talking to each other. You might have actually had a career planner with Jay Jetson, and then by just some circumstance, the contact name happened to be the same, and then we had conflicting user IDs for different types of logins, and both of them ended up getting locked out, and it took a while for Marsha to figure out how to fix it. We have not, knock on wood, had an issue with this since 2015 that I can remember. So if your contact person is going to be entering training programs into IWDS for the OWIA to approve or deny, this username on this view contact screen is the login ID that they will be using on the IWDS public side page. And this is just to blow it up a little bit so that you can see it. Once again, at this point though, if they're going to be logging in, you need to make sure you know whether or not they're the human service provider or ITA training provider for that location. You'll also notice there's another button there, reset password button. So if your person's having trouble logging in on the public side, first thing you're going to want to do, and we'll talk about that on an upcoming screen here, but one of the first things before you start going in and resetting passwords, make sure that they're actually trying to log in on the blue and orange public side IWDS page. 90% of the time when they're having a problem logging in, it's because they're logging in from the wrong page. They're trying to log into the case management side of IWDS instead of the public side. Now, if you've determined they're using the correct URL and that they need their password reset, you're going to go into the contact, just like we were talking about earlier, and you're going to come over here and you're going to click reset password. And just like the IWDS career planners, up at the top, it'll give you an informational message where the new user password is a randomly generated number. You can copy or paste this or do a screenshot and send this to the user via email for them to use to log in. Just like the IWDS career planners, when they do that, it's going to force them to change the password when they log in with it. Now, when you go to provide this information to the person in the very beginning, you're going to want to do this, and you're going to want to immediately click reset password and get yourself a password ID. So you got the user ID, you'll have a newly generated password, and you're going to provide both of these along with this, the public side URL for IWDS. It is slightly different than the regular URL that you use for the case management side. So these are the three items that you have to send to your contact in order for them to be able to enter training program information. This is what the public side URL looks like. Like I said, it is orange and blue instead of red and blue. And for those of you who are sports people, I always use the Fighting Illini as what I think about when I talk about the public side. The orange is unique only to this public side login. Now, if you need to add more contacts to the location from the list contact screen, you can add additional contacts by clicking the add contact button. When you are finished adding contacts to this location, you can move directly on to clicking list relationships in the blue navigation panel on the left side of the screen. And from that link, when it takes you to the next location, you'll be able to review any relationships the entity and location already have set up for that location, or you can set up new relationships with the location. You can also navigate back to the list locations or already on the list contacts, and the list training programs would show any training programs associated with the location as well. At this point, are there any questions about contacts? All right. Give it just another second here. All right, moving on. Relationships. And this is the thing that a lot of people get hung up on, or where we end up having some troubleshooting that happens because the relationships aren't set up properly. So we're going to talk about this starting from the basic beginning. Now we're at the list relationship screen. And the relationships, this list relationship screen is not directly related to the location, it's related to the entity. And I'll show you about that here in a second when we go to create a new add relationship. The LWIA local system administrators are only able to see the relationships between the location and your own LWIA. This location may have multiple relationships with other LWIAs. It could have a relationship with 14, 17, 20, 21, 22, But if you're logging in as OWIA 20, you're only going to see the relationships for OWIA 20. By clicking Add Relationship, it's going to take you back to a search location screen, which is where you begin to start the new relationship. So we're going to click Add Relationship. From here, we're now searching the locations, and you need to enter the entity name. Once again, less is more. You could enter the physical address. You could enter city, state, zip, county, OWIA. Any and all of these different things, or any combination of them, will return different search results. Personally, for me, when I'm entering relationships, and I do have to create the ones for OWIA 90 for the statewide, I always just go with the entity name. And if it's a case of where the entity name and the business name are different, you're still going to turn around and get the result of the entity. You click on the entity, it lists all the locations. You can narrow it down by doing entity and city. You could look at the entire OWIA of all entities that are listed as being in your OWIA. I just find that entity name is the most convenient way for me to work. If you have multiple locations for the same entity providing service to your OWIA, you will need multiple relationships. Relationships are only with one location. They're not with all locations or multiple locations. One relationship for one location. Each location will need to have their own relationship set up with the OWIA. Now, I know some OWIAs have it where their trade relationship is one relationship, and any of their youth are on a different relationship, and then their 1A, 1D are on another, and if there's anything under 1N or disaster, they do it under another. That's fine. However you guys want to do this is right. You can have 15, 20, 30 relationships for your OWIA with the one location. It doesn't matter. You can have as many as you want. You can have as few as you want. Whatever works for you, however you feel best about setting this up, that's how you should do it. I use a partial name search, searching for the entity name. We are looking at Timely Business Company, so I'm searching for Timely. You can use the address, city, zip, county information if you know it to narrow it down. I usually don't. I like having more results and being able to make sure I'm getting the right one. But however you feel comfortable, however you do it is right. This will return a list of locations. When you select your location by clicking the pick button, it will take you to that result. If the location you're looking for is not here, click return and go back and search again using different criteria. So I'm clicking pick. It's taking me to the provider management update basic information screen. This is the first step in creating the relationship. You've picked your location. Now it's real. Here we go. The first step here is going to be to pick your relationship number. When you create your relationship number, it's anything that you want it to be, but it needs to be a unique identifier using the alphanumeric characters. Personally, when I'm creating them, I use the date. And then I have the 0001, 02, 03. That's how I do them in OWIA 90 when I'm creating them. There's some people who type the name of the company and the year. There's some of them who put a unique identifier number that they know what it means. They could put, at the end of it here that this is the TAA, this is the 1A, this is the 1Y. However you want to do it, as long as it's unique, you can always use the extra 2 digits over here to increment it for 00, 01, 02, 03, etc., and keep the same relationship so that it's convenient for you. You could make the relationship something that identifies the location itself. It's however you want to make your naming convention. We definitely recommend that you use something that makes it easy for you to identify the relationship based on the relationship number. It makes it easy for you to identify which location or which business or what services are being provided. Just some way that you understand. Like I said, in this case, I'm using the date, and I'm keeping it 00 because I don't need to increment yet because it's going to be unique and a first one. After you've entered the relationship, the next thing that is required is the relationship type. The drop-down will give you choices of contract, other, referral, or vendor. Once you've selected that, you're going to scroll down to the Fund Source Grant Information area. Now, there's a big long, you have a number of these that are available. I just did a screenshot showing the first three. You have to put in the fund source, whether it's 1A, 1B, 1E, 1N, 1Y, trade. You have to put in a start date for the relationship. You have to put in an end date for the relationship. You do not have to put in the contract amount. You can if you want. We recommend that you leave the contract amount blank. It's not required. Entering a dollar amount here could trigger other programming edits in IWDS on other screens that could cause you problems later. This is one of the things that when troubleshooting a relationship that I look for. If they've got something in the contract amount, I usually go in and wipe it out and see if that fixes the problem. When you enter a fund source, the start date can be in the past, it can be in the present, it can be today, or it can be in the future. The date range entered for the fund source will affect what services are available for this provider based on the dates after the date range. So for example here, this one's got a 1A with a start date of 1/1/2022 and an end date of 6/30/2023. So this service provider and the services being offered will not show up if you try to enter something on 12/31/2021 or if you try to enter something on 7/1/2023. It's only going to appear in this date range. That's another troubleshooting item. If you go to enter something and you're not finding it, it could be because your end date is prior to the date that you're trying to do the service. Once saved, once you finish on the screen and click save, you can never change the start date of a fund source. So if you make a mistake and you put the wrong start date, if it's in the past, what I recommend you do is that you go ahead and you end it the very next day and then create another fund source line. If you put it in the future, then you're going to need to create another fund source line with your actual start date through the day before you've got this one going. But if you make a mistake, once you click save on this, the start date cannot be altered at all. After saving, you can change the end date. If your contract with them goes farther, then you can extend the end date. But you can never shorten it. So if the end date on this one is already listed as 6/30/2023, I could not make it 5/31/23 because I can't go backwards, but I can always extend it, such as your service isn't showing up, first thing you do is you go into the relationship, you check your end dates on the title. Well, that's been extended. These guys are now been extended through 6/30 of 2024. You change the end date to 6/30, 2024, click save, all of a sudden you're good to go again. In this particular case, the 1Y grant, when I created this was going in the future. So this is one of the things that I didn't get around to. I was going to update my my screenshots for 12/11/2023, but let's just pretend today that it is January 10th of 2023 instead of December 13th. So July 1st was in the future, and I could put a future start date with a future end date because I know that this is going to be provided on those dates, and it won't affect anything until it hits that start date. You can enter your fund sources into the future if that's the way that you want to do it. Some people like to wait until it's a lot closer, but some people like to put all the information in when they have it. Once again, there's no wrong way to do this. It's however your LWIA wants to do it. After you've entered all your fund sources with your start dates and your end dates, you're going to click next to save the fund source information and go to add program activities. So now we're here at the list programs activities. At the moment, we have no selected activities or programs. So we're going to click add program activities, and we're going to choose from the title to add services to the relationship. Now, because in our fund source, we only had 1A, 1D, 1Y, that's all that it's giving us choices for. Now, in the past, back when we still had registration required core services and intensive services, those are still coming up, but you do not want to select them. Those program types no longer apply to WIOA. WIOA changed to where they are just career services and training services several years ago. A lot of the newer local system administrators have probably never seen or heard of core and intensive, where those of you who have been around the block a few times remember these and are very grateful they're gone. So when we're here, if we're wanting to add, we're going to be looking at the career and training for 1A, career and training for 1D, and then with youth, we're looking at the youth service elements. We're going to check all programs we want to add activities to. So as I said, career, training, youth elements. At this point, we click next. It verifies that these are the ones that we want to add programs to. We're going to click save. Now we're going to go through one by one, and it's going to give us Fund Source 1A, career first, because that was the top of the list, and it's going to work its way down. Now, for here, we're going to select any and all activities that we want to have associated with this relationship for this location for services that will be available from this location. In this case, we're going to select several. Here's those SS tools, SS uniforms, SS legal aid, like we talked about earlier, that go under the human services stuff. So we're going to select these 11 items, and we're going to click next to move on to 1A training. Once again, we select the appropriate things that we want to assign to this location, and we're going to click next again. Now we're in 1D career. We're going to make those selections, move on to 1D training, select those, Now we're in the 1Y Youth Service Elements, Education, Training, Career. When you click Next on the final fund source that was selected, it's going to take you to a summary screen that looks like this. And these are all of the items that were selected between 1A, 1D, these are both career, then 1A, 1D, training, and all the services under 1Y. If you wish to update any of those sections, just click the update button for each section. It'll take you back to that screen to add or remove items before you click add program activities. From here, it asks you if you want to update your zip codes. I stress this as the highest possible recommendation that I can give any or all of you about creating relationships. OET does not recommend adding zip codes to the relationship. I cannot tell you how many times when troubleshooting a relationship, the answer has been remove the zip codes. First thing to look for is the end date on the fund source. The second thing to look for is if there's zip codes on it. Those are the first two things I look for every time I'm troubleshooting a relationship, and 99% of the relationship problems go away with those first two troubleshooting items. ZIP codes stands for Classification of Instructional Program Codes, for those that were interested. So our recommendation is do nothing here and click Next. At this point, it gives you the relationship summary. You'll notice here the status is pending. All fund sources that I put in on this particular relationship are here. Start dates, end dates. I have 5 different programs with 33 activities selected and 0 zip codes. If I am satisfied with what I see in front of me, I'm just going to click this activate button, at which point it changes to active. Now, if at any point in time you need to deactivate a relationship, there's this button right here, inactivate, and it will change the status back to pending instead of active. At this point right now, however, status is active. This relationship should now be showing up with the services that you go to enter in your OWIA. To show you an example of how the provider should appear in the client services, we're going to open a service in our test client, Briar Rose, and we're going to go in Title 1A. Now, once again, keep in mind that the service needs to appear within the date range and the title, and the service needs to be selected in the relationship. So all of these things have to be there in order for it to appear here. So in the client record, we're going to go under training services, and I'm choosing a start date of 2/1/2022. I'm selecting an activity and training type, whether it's ITA funded or contract funded. So I'm going with occupational skills training. I'm saying it's ITA funded, and I'm moving on to the next screen. Now, as I'm entering all the information, I select my grant, green related. I'm going to click search providers. This is where the relationship comes in. You can click show all, or you can provide the relationship name or the provider relationship name, the relationship number. I usually click show all. Those of you who have more relationships entered will probably want to narrow it down. Joel, I'm going to answer that question right now because it is a timely question. No pun intended. The relationship should show up immediately. If for some reason it does not, you can try logging out and logging back in and then do a search relationship and see if it's there, there should not be a lag. As soon as you click save, and you should be able to go in and immediately do what I'm doing with the service. So I click show all just because that's just what I'm used to doing, and I don't have that many relationships in my test environment. So then it makes me go, I have 4 pages, 3 at a time, and I just have to go next page, next page, next page, so I find the one I'm looking for. Now, you could have multiple results of the same provider name with different relationships IDs, because depending on how your OWIA does this, you might have multiple relationships per location. That's why it's very important to make sure your relationship ID is something you can identify on site. So at this point, I'm looking for Timely Business Company. I'm going to keep clicking next page so I get to page 4, because they're going to come back alphabetically. And there's Timely Business Company with the relationship ID. I did mine by date that I'm looking for. So I'm going to pick that relationship. At this point, the provider relationship ID and the name of the company, the entity name, are going to show up right here on the provider line. So now we need to make sure the service is in the relationship, which it was. Occupational skills was something we selected. We're in the right title, 1A, and it's inside the active date range, which was between 1/1/22 and 6/30/23. Everything is coming up roses because these first 3 things that we look at are correct. So each LWIA across the state should have at least one local system administrator that has the responsibility of maintaining the provider entity relationships. Some LWIAs have multiple local system administrators that do it. Some people just assign one. However you guys do it is right. We're not going to tell you that there's a wrong way to do this. I will say that if you have multiple people doing this, you should have a clear dividing line so they're not working on top of each other. Like, say this person handles entity names A through M, this one does N through Z. This person handles anything geographically on this part of our LWIA, and this person handles this part. This person handles them in this county. This person handles them in that county. You should have something where it's not, they're not walking all over each other and duplicating efforts. That's just a recommendation, not a requirement. The local system administrators that are responsible for maintaining the provider entity relationships need to establish and maintain a schedule of their own choosing for updating relationship end dates. Like I said, first thing you look at when you're having an issue, when a service isn't showing up, is usually the end date, provider end date. Usually it's expired, it's passed, you need to extend it. It's very similar to what happens with the grant. You know, it's usually the very first thing I look for, and it's usually the first thing that corrects everything and moves us along. So these are some things that when I polled the different LWIAs, probably about 5 years ago, and I asked what the different ways the local system administrators who handled relationships, how did they do their ways of auditing these and looking at them? Well, some people used end of program year. So they schedule toward the latter part of June every year, because program year is July 1 to June 30th. And they go in once a year and look at all of their relationships and do it at the end of the program year. Some LWIAs did it at the end of the calendar year. They know that the week between Christmas and New Year's is usually a pretty light work week. That's the time that they decided to set their audit. So they do it toward the latter part of December every year. And they look at all of their relationships in a 12-month period, making sure everything's updated for the following calendar year. Some of the LWIAs did it twice a year. Some of them, and all of the people who did it twice a year, did half in December and half in June. And some LWIAs, because they have so many relationships, did it quarterly, where they scheduled quarterly and they reviewed a portion of their relationships every 3 months. This is one where I will say that there were some LWIAs that did things differently than this and just did it randomly. I think these 4 make sense. These 4 can be put on a schedule. These 4 are easy to remember. If you're doing it when you think about it, what happens when you don't think about it? So if your LWIA does not have one of these 4 choices as how they look at their relationships, I strongly recommend changing to one of these 4. There's no required direction from OET for maintaining relationship end dates to make sure the relationships stay current. This is something each local system administrator who's assigned the responsibility of provider entity relationships at the LWIA must keep the information up to date. So make sure that your local system administrator who's doing this is someone who is, well, I would say meticulous, tedious, likes to cross T's and dot I's. This is the backbone of your case, of your services. This is how you get to report the things and get paid. So this is extremely important. If the LWIA does not maintain their relationships, you run the risk that these relationships expire, and this will restrict your various career planner staff from being able to record services on client records in IWDS and getting you paid. The LWIA point of contact for training providers is another portion of this section here on the public side URL. And I'm bringing this up because this is something that sometimes gets forgotten. It's very important that the LWIA keeps the contact information on the public side of IWDS up to date. If the local system administrator who's the main contact for your LWIA has left your employment, this information needs to be updated ASAP. I strongly recommend when this training is over today, that if you are the local system administrator who is the main point contact for your agency, that you go out here and you check to see that everything's up to date. If the person who does this is not on this training and you are, and I would recommend going and take a look, and if their information is not out there, let them know so that they can go ahead and get out here and update it. In order to see who's listed in your LWIA, click the new provider button, which is down here on, some of you may have never seen this public side URL before, but you click this new provider, and then you go here and it's going to say, find your my local workforce investment board. Type in the zip code, a zip code that's in your LWIA, and click return. And this is what comes back. In my test environment, I use LWIA 15, which I know doesn't exist anymore. And this is the information that I have for LWIA 15 in my test environment. It tells me that it's the Land of Lincoln Workforce Alliance at this address, and that the main local system administrator for this location, for this LWIA, is John Doe, my old phone number, and an email address. If any of this information has changed, someone needs to email the IWDS performance measure staff, Paula Berry and Mark Burgess, and CC the IWDS system administrators, Chris Tylen and Jim Potts, to make sure that this information gets updated. Now, at this point, I will take any questions on relationships. And if you guys have any questions when this is over, you're going to get a copy of this PowerPoint, and you can always email me. You can email Jim Potts, Mark Burgess, Paula Berry. We're always here. You know, I think all four of us do a really good job at what we do. And whenever you need us, we're here. This is the contact information. These are the phone numbers have changed. We have been issued new phone numbers with our new office building. However, I strongly recommend that email is the best way to do things, better than a voicemail, because we have a written record of what your question is. You can send us screenshots of the errors. You can send us a lot more information in an email than what we're going to see in a voicemail. And if you send an email, if you're contacting Jim, CC me. If you're contacting me, CC Jim. If it's something that involves the performance measure staff, CC Paula in there. Or if you're sending it to Paula and it involves relationships, CC me. You can include as many of us on an email as you need, and one of us is going to respond to you. I personally think that it's better to have an email that comes to more of us, because then if somebody's out of the office, if one of us is out sick, we have a sick kid, we're on vacation, somebody can answer you in a timely manner because they're going to see that nobody responded. So, like I said, I personally feel that when you guys need assistance from us, it's better to email than it is to make a phone call. And we can always call you after we get the email if it's something that we need to walk through with you step by step. And with that, we are finished. This is one of those ones where sometimes this goes a little longer because of questions. Sometimes it goes pretty quick. I thank everybody for their time today. And like I said, if you need something, reach out. All right, Antonio, if we don't have anything in the chat in the next couple of minutes, you can go ahead and end. With that, I'll let everybody get back to their Wednesday morning. Kelly, yes, the PowerPoint will be sent out probably this afternoon. And when I have the links for the postings of the webinars on Illinois WorkNet, I'm going to send everything out one more time to everybody that was on the registration list. I think these PowerPoints are great reference tools for the local system administrators. I update them every time we do a new training, so obviously you'll want to get the most recent one if I do another one.
All right, I have put the PowerPoint in the chat. I'll give everybody a couple of seconds to save that, and then we should be good to end this session. Unless anybody has any last minute questions. All right. Again, by tomorrow, Kirsten will send you the recording and the PowerPoint again. So if you weren't able to get it this round, you'll be able to get it later. Thank you very much for everyone for attending. I'm going to go ahead and end this webinar. Have a good day.